In this month's Flu, my contributing editor, Greg Kaczynski, talks about a case from the state of Washington called In Marriage of Cheng. Marriage of Cheng is one of the cases that deals with an issue that's known as double counting, sometimes double dipping, but I think double counting is a better way of phrasing it, which is that two items, for want of a better term, should not be used two different times in the same case. And we're usually talking about used as both an asset and as a basis for support. This issue comes up any number of places in the law, particularly in professional businesses where all there is to sell generally is the stream of income coming in. Cheng deals with a commercial business, and the issue in commercial businesses is more in the line of when there is a income coming in, sometimes known as accounts receivable, and those are valued as part of the value of the business. Is it double counting when the business owner's income, which is derived from those accounts receivable, is also used as a basis for support? The general law seems to be that where it's a professional business, that the saleability has no goodwill component to it. And there are cases in Wisconsin going as far back as Holbrook that says that there is no saleable goodwill for professional businesses, and therefore no value that should be placed on the stream of income, and that it's only available as support. Divorce law firm is probably the best immediate example of that. If I were to call clients tomorrow and say, gee, Loeb & Herman isn't in business anymore, it's now Greg's law firm, and instead of being on Wisconsin Avenue in Milwaukee, we're going to be on Michigan Avenue in Milwaukee, I think very few clients, I don't think any, are going to say, gee, we really like the name, or gee, we really like that location. They're individually loyal to a person as opposed to the entity itself. And therefore, for most types of professional businesses, the income is all that there is. And no one's going to buy that particular professional business unless they also can buy the individual who runs, operates, or works for the business, because that's all it's worth. And that's quite different from a commercial business, where somebody may very well buy it because the corporate goodwill can be transferred. You're dealing with, I don't know, a gas station. It's got a great location on a great corner. That's perfectly saleable. Certain names have recognition and therefore can be sold. The concept, though, in terms of accounts receivable and income, is a bit more nuanced and a little bit more difficult, because if you say that the income from a commercial business is what creates the salary, the income of the owner to pay support, and therefore shouldn't also be valued as an asset, it ignores the fact that that accounts receivable is constantly being replenished. I sort of compare it to the child's doll, which has a milk bottle that when you tilt it over, it seems the milk's coming out, and put the bottle back upright, and the bottle's filled with milk again. No matter how many times you essentially tilt the accounts receivable to have it pay out in the form of income, you put it back and new accounts receivables are being generated, new work's being generated, and it always remains at a constant level. And the reason that's important is that sometime in the future the business may be sold, and let's assume that it's sold purely for asset value. Well, that account receivable has an asset. So whereas during the course of running the business was constantly generating income, and the accounts receivable were being paid, which as lawyers is a really nice thing when that happens, then the owner or professional is constantly making an income that's available for support, but at some time in the future, he or she will be able to cash it in. In Chen, they say that the difference is where the future cash flow represents a return on the asset rather than a return of the asset in and of itself. So where the asset is being returned, and I think that's more clear that if you're saying you're selling a part of the business, you're selling the furniture in the business, something where there is no return, it's not being replenished, is different than when it's a return on the asset in the sense that it's constantly being replenished. It's a complicated subject. There's a lot of case law on it, and it's one of those which, fortunately for divorce lawyers, not so fortunately perhaps for everybody else, there isn't a simple answer. And on a case-by-case basis, it may very well be an argument that can be made before the court. So my advice for lawyers on these cases is to very carefully assess the individual nature of the business and of its components. Assess to what extent what you're valuing in the business is something that's a return on the asset, and the asset is being constantly replenished, at which point I think there's a very good argument that the asset that you're dealing with, in the Chen case, accounts receivable, is remaining constant and someday can be cashed in on. But I wouldn't give up the ship on it and just say, well, then in every case there's no such thing as double counting, because there are other cases when it can be. And if the individual nature of the business is the type in which the asset is not being replaced, and for whatever reason, the return is of the asset itself. And I think in a professional business, it very commonly can come up is if the professional is getting to or at the point considering retirement, at which point the professional will not be generating the same type of income as previously. That's when it becomes a much better argument that the asset, it's a return of the asset, not on the asset, and therefore to count it for both purposes would be double counting. But again, it's a case-by-case basis. It's one where lawyers need to meet with their client, consider the various components, and try to make an argument to the court either way as best befits the circumstances of the individual case. Read Cheng. Read Greg Kaczynski's summary of it, which I think is quite good, and then read the case. There's various Wisconsin cases on it as well, and take a look at those for an individual case, because having citations to help you convince the court really is critical.